All of these right-wingers trying to disprove, quote-unquote, that the Allen Mall shooter was a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist, are literally telling on themselves. Like, okay, this guy's making Nazis look bad because he committed a heinous act and killed children. How does that affect you? Why are you worried about that information coming to light? Huh? Like, any normal person should be able to understand that. Like, why are you concerned? Well, you're either then, at that point, worried that it's going to reflect badly on you because maybe you share similar views. Maybe you've used similar rhetoric. Maybe you have similar ideological motivations. Maybe you have similar ideologies, even. Maybe. It's not good, folks. These are our enemies, and somehow they still retain any modicum of power in our society. So in case you've been living under a rock, the completely predictable and also preventable has happened yet again. In the greatest country the world has ever seen, the United States of America, another mass shooting has occurred, this time in Allen, Texas, at a mall, a shopping mall. Here's an NPR article just to briefly go over it in case you haven't heard of it until then. Obviously, there's going to be a content warning about a variety of things as it pertains to this. Authorities have now released the names of some of the victims, while evidence suggests the gunman held far-right extremist beliefs. The suspect was identified as 33-year-old Mauricio Garcia, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety. Garcia was killed by police. Saturday's attack is considered to be the second deadliest mass shooting of 2023, according to data from the Gun Violence Archive. So here's what we know. The victims who were killed range in age from 3 to 37 years old. In a statement Monday afternoon, the Texas Department of Public Safety said it had positively identified the victims in Saturday's attack. The agency added that it will not release the identities of anyone under the age of 18 nor the victims who are injured. The victims have been identified as Kyusung Cho, male, age 37 of Dallas, Cindy Cho, female, age 35 of Dallas, two females aged 11 and 8 from Sache, Texas, a male age 3, Jesus Christ, of Dallas, Christian Lacor, male, age 20 of Nevada, Texas, Elio Kumana Rivas, male, age 32 of Dallas, Texas, and Aishwarya Tatikonda, female, age 26 of McKinney, Texas. The Houston office of the South Korean consulate told the Dallas Morning News that one of Kyusung Cho and Cindy Cho's children was also killed in the shooting. And we'll get into a bit more of that in a second, but we've seen this all before. This is nothing new if you're an American. Literally the rest of the world, once they're done mourning the loss of life, move on to laughing at us for being the only industrialized nation that this regularly happens in. And I've talked a lot about this. We've done a lot of different videos whenever different shootings have happened about my prescriptions as to how we could potentially stop these kinds of things from happening. We'll be doing that again in this segment as well. But I wanted to look at this Eric Toller thread, who apparently does research and training for Bellingcat. So apparently, according to Eric Toller, says he took a while, but I found the Odnaklasniki. This is Russian. I'm not Russian. Profile of the Allen, Texas shooter described in this New York Times article. So investigators trying to learn why a gunman fatally shot at least 8 people at a Texas mall are examining a social media profile rife with hate-filled rants against women and black people that they believe belong to the gunman. The profile found on the social media site ok.ru matches the gunman's birthday and refers to a motel where he was staying before the shooting. The profile also includes language praising Hitler with references to neo-Nazi websites like the Daily Stormer. On Sunday, officials identified the gunman who was killed at the mall by a police officer as Mauricio Garcia, 33. The motive for the attack remains unclear. As of, the writing of this article that's being screenshot. So apparently his YouTube account was found. The most recent post on his OK, that aforementioned Russian website, profile is basically his manifesto/suicide note. He closes it with a quote from South Park. So we've got a post from April 21st, which has, of course, 2 Punisher logos, which right-wingers love, even though apparently the Punisher would not be a big fan of the right-wingers that have now taken the logo for the Punisher. And this is the Texas flag with the Punisher logo on it. He also has a badge that says Right-Wing Death Squad. That's what RWDS stands for. It is notable that I don't think there's been any connection to this specific group. It is notable that the Proud Boys, the leader of which, Enrique Tarrio, and a variety of others, I believe 4 total, were recently convicted, I believe, of federal crimes because of their actions on Jan 6th. Also wear WRDS memorabilia and also sell it. It's possible there's a connection there. We don't actually know because we haven't found that information out yet. But it is notable that other right-wing groups, because it literally stands for Right-Wing Death Squad, do use this similar kind of iconography. Do with that information what you may. Apparently, he was leaving cryptic notes as well. Don't really care about that. This is the big one. He's got an SS tattoo on his bicep from the post here, allegedly, and a swastika on, I believe, his left pec on his chest. So, his personal politics, very hard to figure out, right? So here's a variety of posts as well. The first two images here, which I believe this thread gets into in a second, are actually images from the mall, I believe, in Allen, Texas, where this occurred. I believe the article gets into that further. Also, a bunch of screenshots of Nick Fuentes on another, I believe, right-wing podcast. Also got a bunch of Timcast IRL screenshots, which is interesting. So, unsurprisingly, you'll notice that right-wing pundits seem to find their way into the social media activity, or literally the manifestos, of far-right extremist killers and mass killers pretty frequently. Now, apparently, Tim Pool, is allegedly one of this guy's favored YouTube channels to watch, as you can see from these screenshots from this social media account. So, obviously, it's a buzzword by this point, but the left has been talking about the phenomenon of stochastic terrorism for a long time. The idea that you exacerbate a variety of conditions by pushing certain rhetoric that rile people up into a frenzy, and then those people, disconnected from you, the person who pushed that rhetoric and all of that, eventually those people who've been riled up by all that go out and commit acts of terror, and you're disconnected enough to not really be directly implicated, and therefore you cannot be held to account in any major way, especially not legally. The most you might see is like social media TOS violations or something. And this is how a lot of people get away with being hyped up by these mass shooters. It's a very easy way to keep your hands clean while kind of nudging people in a certain direction. And you can do this unwittingly, by the way. You could be pushing all kinds of rhetoric that you would not potentially expect somebody to go and act on in that way, but that historically tends to be how that happens. So it's not to say that everybody engaging with it is malicious and wants it to happen, but if you are able to understand the way that that works and the historical precedent for it, you decide to continue doing what you're doing and pushing the rhetoric you're pushing, well, you're either unaware or leaning toward malicious, right? You either are indifferent to the suffering of people that your rhetoric causes, or, you're kind of a fan of it, maybe. Because complete and total denunciation is what would be required to kind of dispel any notion that you're actually, regretful that your rhetoric may have played a part. Of course, nobody ever wants to admit fault in any kind of shit like that, because it does not look very good. Eric Toller says, it's worth noting that the Allen shooter didn't have any friends or groups on his OK profile. He used it like a personal diary. He may have chosen OK because it has virtually zero content moderation. So this is a big problem that a lot of right-wingers run into. That's why Elon Musk bought Twitter, and now every blue checkmark reply you'll see on anything to do, about black or brown people has the most racist dog shit comments pushed to the top. A variety of neo-Nazis were unbanned after Elon Musk took over. And now, as we'll see in a bit, Elon Musk seems to be a big fan of engaging with said far-right extremists on Twitter. The big problem right-wingers have is that they get clapped up in TOS a lot because they have difficulty not saying slurs, they have difficulty not pushing racist dog whistles that are a bit too obvious, they're not very creative in their bigotry, so it's easy to report them and for them to, be found in violation of TOS, and they get banned. And they don't like that. So oftentimes they'll go to places like Parler, like Truth Social, like Rumble, in order to try to get around that TOS, but still be able to get their information that they want to get out there, their content out there. So this is not unsurprising either. Also, from this profile, Eric Toller found, he was at the mall where he did the attack 3 weeks prior. He was monitoring the peak visiting times on Google. So 3 weeks before, allegedly, if this is the actual shooter, which it seems like it is, this was kind of telegraphed. If there was somebody in law enforcement who was cognizant of this person's activities, you would imagine that this person is probably not somebody who should be owning a firearm or having access to one, and maybe preventing that person from obtaining said firearms might be a good idea if you don't want senseless killing to happen. This is in Texas. It's a Republican-led state, and we live in hell. So you've got here GPS coordinates, it would seem. He's using Google Maps to get there. We got a screenshot of the Allen Mall, Allen Premium Outlets, and he's looking at the peak hours. We've got a screenshot of a Maps overview of the location. And you've also got an image of him either from Google Street View or literally there. It's likely he was literally there. Apparently he's posted a receipt for the kit that the Allen, Texas shooter bought back in 2020. Posted a few weeks before the shooting. He also posted photos of his weapons, which is a thing that these kinds of people like to do a lot. We got boxes upon boxes of ammunition. These photos were posted at the same time as pictures he took at the Allen Mall. That might be a red flag, maybe, if you're, in law enforcement looking at this. We got a bunch of different posts with swastikas and other German Nazi Party memorabilia. Eric Toller goes on to say, calling someone a violent incel has lost a lot of meaning in the last few years with the term being so overused, but apparently it fits here. And I'm not going to read the manifesto. We got some bullshit like disenfranchised males equals self-destructive males. The violent responses of men today are retaliatory. Incel/manosphere extremism is on the rise. Not only is the rhetoric on the rise, but also a lot of mass shooters are attributing a lot of what they're doing in their manifestos to incel-type ideology. So much so that in recent graphs by the ADL, I believe, about the ideologies of extremist-related killings, they're actually including incel and manosphere ideology in that, which is a bit disturbing. Worth noting that he uploaded this video before the shooting and scheduled for it to be published onto his YouTube channel after the shooting. In a March post, he linked to the same YouTube channel, so it's definitely his. We're not going to look at this video, but it says Psychovision face reveal M. Garcia, which seems to suggest that it is the same person. Also, it's the same apartment that he posted back in December 22 on his OK page. He posted a meme, so this is the big meme that we'll get into in a sec. So Garcia, not exactly a white name, at least not an Anglo name, right? Like, you could be a white Latino. That is a thing that can happen. There are white Latinos in a variety of Latin American countries. But he posted this because he himself seems to be Latino, where there's the classic meme of the bright and shining mansion and then the nightmare one. And you got a fork in the road, Latino children. On the left, apparently this is what's considered the good by this meme. Act black, whatever that means. Sounds like this guy, not a big fan of black people. Or on the other side of the road, in the bad section, become white supremacists, like, say, Nick Fuentes or Enrique Tarrio. And down here, he provided a caption for this. Quote, "It's funny because it's true. I think I'll take my chances with the white supremacists. Absolute fucking loser." More images of people with Nazi armbands saying "my kind of people." You got people Sieg Heiling in front of a Nazi flag. It's hard to say if this guy was, sympathetic to or a neo-Nazi himself. Who's to say? It's really difficult to put the pieces together, The smartest minds of our generation could not figure this out. Probably done posting this thread, but in summary, the Allen shooter was obviously a white supremacist / neo-Nazi. He was basically announcing that he was going to do the mass shooting for months beforehand and planned his target weeks in advance. He also posted his handwritten personal diary. Everything I've seen shows that this is about the most textbook mass shooter you'll ever find, and he tells you about it every step of the way. One last thing, noticed by Jake Godin. The Allen shooter was a big fan of Libs of TikTok and signed off one of his posts with, the classic Nazi salute. So here's the manifest. I'm not going to read it all, but it says here this post was inspired by Libs of TikTok, and we got anti-Semitism in here, talking about schooling that he was in, yada, yada, yada. So I am willing to believe this information because it is not unsurprising that this is the actual shooter's account. And it is overwhelmingly likely that the shooter is a white supremacist, neo-Nazi, far-right winger. The reason why I say this is not unsurprising, and I apologize for not having this up immediately, because, I've talked about this before. I've now even made a little meme for it. You got, from the ADL, domestic extremist-related killings in the United States by perpetrator affiliation from 2013 to 2022, so over the last decade. Right-wing extremists are responsible for the great majority of extremist-related murders over the last decade. Of 444 total deaths, right-wing extremism, all movements, accounts for 75%. Then they have left-wing extremism, which includes apparently anarchists and black nationalists, 4%. Domestic Islamist extremism, 20%, and other/miscellaneous extremism, 1%. And most often than not, any kind of Islamist extremism is going to be fundamentalist right-wing as well. So if you want to lump that in with the 75%, you got 95% of extremist-related killings in the United States of America over the last decade are right-wing. Now, of those 75% that are in the right-wing extremism from this graph, the grand majority of those, 3 out of 4, in another graph, are white supremacists, which is quite literally what we're seeing this dude was. So that's why I say it's not surprising. It follows the theme. It follows the very predictable theme that a lot of these happen to follow. The same ideological side of the fence that excuses all kinds of violence when it suits their narratives, when it suits their worldview, seems to have a lot of people who are willing to do violence in their camp. I don't think that's a shocking conclusion to find from that. So now we got reactions to this. All this news comes out. It seems to be pretty ironclad that this was a right-wing, white supremacist, neo-Nazi or neo-Nazi sympathizer. So, of course, you know, all the right-wing pundits out there, they're gonna be like, oh, that guy's a piece of shit. Fuck that guy, he's a neo-Nazi. We hate neo-Nazis. Nazis, they're bad, right? All the right-wingers are gonna come out, because why wouldn't they, right? There's nothing that you lose as a right-winger, as a right-wing pundit, by understanding that the shooter was more than likely a neo-Nazi. Like, I don't see what the issue would be. Like, you're not a neo-Nazi, so if there's a neo-Nazi that did this heinous thing, why does it affect you if it turns out he's a neo-Nazi? Well, apparently not. You got Andy No. He wrote, quote, "The brown face of white supremacy? A leftist Bellingcat writer has posted screenshots from the purported obscure OK social media profile of the Allen, Texas mass shooter, Mauricio Garcia. He's trying to link the shooter to Tim Cass and lives at TikTok. The account has photos of random Latino people wearing or posing in front of neo-Nazi symbols. Bellingcat is a government-funded site that has sourcing from intelligence agencies and employs radical leftists." Does it really employ radical leftist writers? From my understanding, radical leftists are not the biggest fan of the military-industrial complex. So the idea that they would employ radical leftist writers, kind of ludicrous to me. We got the red-headed libertarian. It's a psyop, and it's not even good. So you got a quote tweet from Ian Miles Chong, who lives in Malaysia, who just happens to have a fixation on American politics for some reason, who is consistently pushing a white supremacist ideology. I believe I have, this might be coming up as well, I think. Yeah, you have the alleged shooter's alleged profile claims that he was inspired by libs of TikTok. Between this and Tim Pool references, this thing is suspect. Where is his Twitter account? Why was he using a Russian social media site to write it was essentially a diary to 0 followers? Probably because he knew it would be found. And he knew that that website having so little content moderation meant that he could get away with posting it all there. Because a lot of the times when people are doing these mass shootings, they understand that the media will dig into their histories, and they want to leave something behind for that, because that's kind of part of why they do it. They want to be remembered for this heinous act because they have no positive way to be remembered. There's a whole history of this. There are people smarter than me who have researched the motivations of mass shooters and other evil people like this. Might be one of the reasons. But of course, yeah, it's a false flag. It's just a psyop, right? And of course, you got Tim Pool himself, who was allegedly mentioned in the shooter's social media posts. I'm assuming they posted the fake Russian profile in response to the fact that a trans person shot kids and they are terrified. So he's talking about the Nashville shooting, because all you're going to have at this point is whataboutism. Tim Pool's absolutely shitting himself because the completely predictable has happened when you push people talking about, oh my god, civil war, civil war, civil war, like Tim Pool always does, and you push white supremacist conspiracy theories all the time and provide cover for a variety of white supremacists by bringing them on your program. There are going to be people out there that kind of use that information, maybe not in the ways that you wanted, though that is a bit iffy, you know? And we'll get to that in a second. But really quickly, I wanted to look at this current whataboutism. The what about Nashville? Right? The Nashville shooter. It was, I believe, a trans masculine person, so not a trans woman, but likely a trans man, who went to the Nashville Christian school that they allegedly attended, and they went and killed a bunch of people at this school. And they were killed at the scene of the crime, so they were not able to be interviewed after the fact, after they were arrested and gone through trial in the justice system. But the thing is that the left literally gave that shooter universal condemnation. Like, rest in piss, you will not be missed. I'm glad that that motherfucker is rotting in the ground for doing what they did. Because the difference between me and Tim Pool is that I think these things happening are bad, and I support policies that would make it less likely for them to happen. Tim Pool might say he thinks these things happening are bad, but he also opposes any policy that would make them less likely to happen. And in fact, he supports policy that makes them more likely to happen by loosening common sense gun regulation. So because I'm not an ideological hack, I can say that the shooting is bad, the shooter is bad, regardless of their identity, and then also support policies that would make it potentially less likely for that kind of shit to happen in the future. Tim Pool cannot say the same. So he has to what about? There's nothing there. There's no whataboutism there. Now, of course, there's a variety of things about this, so we'll move past that, because they literally faced universal condemnation from the left, because the left is not a big fan of mass shootings. It's kind of, a thing that right-wingers make fun of them all the time for about their gun control views. They'll also say, well, why haven't we seen so Matt Walsh said something like this. Why haven't we seen the Nashville shooters manifesto? As far as I'm aware, the Nashville shooters manifesto was a handwritten note that was recovered by law enforcement. However, the manifesto posted from the Allen, Texas mass shooter was posted on a public forum online, meaning that anybody could access it. That's why we're seeing the manifesto so quickly. There will be a variety of reasons why law enforcement might redact or withhold information that they might find in a perpetrator's manifesto, and those reasons can vary. But the reason why we don't have the entirety of the manifesto for the Nashville shooters is because it was a handwritten note that was recovered, whereas this one was a online public social media post. Anybody could have seen it, so it's public already. You can't really hide that anymore, if there is even any kind of hiding, but it's usually just redacting, things that might pertain to the case, that might make the case harder to solve, or all this kind of shit. So we have Keith Olbermann replying to Ian Miles Chong, who is currently trying to provide cover for the mass shooter for whatever reason. Keith Olbermann replies saying, sure, it's suspect because your side and lives at TikTok got caught inspiring a mass murderer. Blood on your hands, fuck you. Tim Pool quote tweets this saying, I literally don't care what the cult thinks, like at all. Fart, fart, fart. Keith Olbermann, I'd say you're as dumb as a box of rocks, but that's demeaning the rocks. Like, he's got nothing. He's got nothing in reply because he's caught. This is not a good situation to be in if you're Tim Pool. Now, of course, I don't know that anything will actually happen about this. But going off of that, we have the redheaded libertarian. It's a psyop and it's not even good. Elon Musk retweeted by Ian Miles Chong, of course, saying this gets weirder by the moment. So the current owner of Twitter and previous most wealthy person in the world who is now in the hole for overpaying for Twitter to the tune of $44 billion that he got forced into going through on the deal with after being stupid as fuck and landing him in that position, continuing to engage with this kind of idea. From Stephen Monticelli. Elon Musk appears to have no issue with stoking conspiracy theories about mass murders. No wonder advertisers are fleeing from this hell site. So you've got the Nazi account and wokeness. Black supremacist mows down 62 white people at a Christmas parade. 18 months later, no motive. Trans terrorist attacks a Christian school and writes a manifesto. 6+ weeks later, no motive. Hispanic male shoots up a mall and kills several white people. Citation needed. We already saw earlier who some of the victims were. Was not a lot of white names in there. One day later, white supremacy. Elon Musk says, odd. So the thing about this is, so I unfortunately don't remember a lot about this particular mass incident because there are so many of them in this shithole country. But for what I do know, trans Harris attacks a Christian school and writes a manifesto. 6 weeks later, no motive. From what we have seen from the manifesto, apparently the piece of shit who did a mass shooting at this Christian school apparently was just really mentally unwell and idolized a variety of mass shooters in the past and seems to have been potentially trying to mimic those things from those mass shooters that they idolize, which is a red flag if I've ever heard one. Like, you might have been able to find out information about that person and their potential to do this kind of mass incident beforehand and then try to limit their access to firearms using a variety of policies that we'll get into in a second. But we got Elon Musk here, of course, signal boosting conspiracy theories. Pretty cool. And then, of course, Elon Musk saying it gets weirder by the moment. We also have, so another banger from Elon Musk. You got people here who are protesting the murder of Neely on the subway in New York by blocking the subway tracks, which is absurd, by the way. Like, this is very dangerous. Not only because the third rail is electrified, meaning that you can get electrocuted from touching it, you gotta be very careful, but also it's a literal subway on tracks here. And you got a bunch of people protesting because of the inaction over Neely's murder. And now Elon Musk is saying, why didn't they protest when the children were murdered at the Christian school? They are disingenuous. Motherfucker, 2 lawmakers participated in a protest at the Tennessee Capitol and were expelled by the Tennessee legislature for doing so. They were called literal terrorists, the people protesting the inaction from the Republicans in the wake of the Nashville Christian school shooting. Like, the protest happened. It was a international story that 2 Tennessee lawmakers, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, were expelled for protesting this. What do you mean? Where you been? You live your entire life on Twitter. It was a massive moment on Twitter as well. Like, this is your platform. How are you not aware of this? But it's because he doesn't want to be aware of it. I believe he is willfully ignoring that because this is the narrative they're going with. The narrative is, oh, What about the one trans person who committed a mass shooting compared to the hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of cis people who have committed a mass shooting? What about that singular incident? Even though being trans makes you statistically less likely to be a mass shooter. What about that one, because we're currently working overtime to demonize trans people as a method of trying to win votes, even though it doesn't seem to be very useful to that end. Or simply because they are disgusted and / hate trans people and don't want them to exist. And now we also have another post from End Wokeness, seemingly one of Elon Musk's favorite accounts as time has gone on. Perspective is everything. Literally 1350ing. Interracial violent crime incidents 2018. And you got a bar graph, black on white on Hispanic, white on black, white on Hispanic, Hispanic on white, Hispanic on black. And then you got, oh, the media is only paying attention to white on black. Elon Musk replies, odd, why would the media misrepresent the real situation to such an extreme degree? So this is literally like a classic conspiracy theory and rhetorical device used by white supremacists and often neo-Nazis. Like, you cannot move me from my belief that Elon Musk is literally a white supremacist himself. He grew up in apartheid South Africa and is heir to an emerald mine. Even as much as he denies that, his father has completely fucked him up by saying that it's actually true. Kareem Carr, who is a PhD student in statistics, has a really good thread that I'll link to in the description. I'm not going to read all of it right now. But they write, this bar chart has attracted the attention of the richest man in the world. Let me walk you through how I would interpret it as a statistician and a human. It's a really good thread and dispels with the right-wing framing of this, because the entire point of this graphic is to be like, oh, well, the media ignores all these minorities, these non-white people committing crimes, and only focuses on white-on-black crime, even though that's not necessarily true, because there is a lot of fear-mongering that the media does about black and brown people and their supposed propensity for being in gangs or participating in violent, believe what you want to believe, I guess. Whatever you have to cope with. Not very good. It is not good stuff. For a previously richest person in the world to buy a major information network, to now be pushing white supremacist talking points and conspiracy theories, not very good, one, for the future of this particular platform, and two, for the future of this country. There are a lot of really wealthy white supremacists out there. Kind of distressing. And now, just because we have to go through all these conspiracy theories that the right wing is going to push, we got Matt Binder posting about this mugshot here. You may have seen it. The right wing quickly ran with this because they initially thought that, oh, the shooter has been identified by the police to be having the last name Garcia, so surely it's a brown person. Let's see if we can make it out that he's part of the Mexican cartel, and maybe we can buttress our anti-immigration talking points using that. They took a picture that is not the shooter, as far as I'm aware, that shows him with a neck tattoo before all of this new information that we just went over from the Eric Toller thread came to light. And they're looking at this image, being like, something is off. Either the guy in the mugshot is wrong, or this Nazi dude is a different person entirely. Doesn't the neck tattoo look like older ink? Why is it missing here? But it wasn't, that's not the correct person. Matt Binder wrote, it's very simple. The guy on the left isn't and never was the shooter. No actual legitimate media outlet ever posted the photo of the guy with the neck tattoo. You and your idiot right-wing buddies ID'd the wrong guy and spread it. Why are you all so stupid? So it's because they literally fell for their own misinformation. They are now trying to use that to discredit the reporting that we're seeing in this thread. Like, congratulations. You played yourself. But because you can never take an L, because you're all cowards, you have to continue to try to parlay that L into another L, right? And we got another person talking about it. Where did his neck tattoo go? Because the guy with the neck tattoo is not him. Idiots like you just Googled the shooter's name and ran with the first picture you saw and assumed it was him. No legitimate news source ever claimed that was the guy you did. Fucking stupid. Like, mentally deranged. But unfortunately for them, it doesn't seem like it was a Mexican cartel member. It seems like it was a white supremacist neo-Nazi, people who happen to be fans of Tim Pool, Candace Owens, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump. Unfortunate. A bit of an optical blunder on your part. Now, of course, you could distance yourself from that person and be like, hey, the fact that guy is a Nazi doesn't do anything to me because I'm not a Nazi. So now I don't need to be trying to deny that this person is a Nazi because I'm not one. And why would them making Nazis look bad affect me at all? It doesn't affect me. I don't give a shit. Fuck that Nazi bitch. You could say that, but then unfortunately you would alienate a lot of your audience. So you kind of can't. You're telling on yourself. All of these right-wingers trying to disprove, quote-unquote, that the Allen Mall shooter was a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist, are literally telling on themselves. Like, okay, this guy's making Nazis look bad because he committed a heinous act and killed children. How does that affect you? Why are you worried about that information coming to light? Huh? Like, any normal person should be able to understand that. Like, why are you concerned? Well, you're either then, at that point, worried that it's going to reflect badly on you because maybe you share similar views. Maybe you've used similar rhetoric. Maybe you have similar ideological motivations. Maybe you have similar ideologies, even. Maybe. It's not good, folks. These are our enemies, and somehow they still retain any modicum of power in our society. So, of course, what are we to do about it? Well, we've got Greg Abbott on the horn after the tragedy, governor of Texas, to give us some insight onto his views. You know, a very powerful person, governor of Texas. Let's see what he's got.
People want a quick solution. The long-term solution here is to address the mental health issue. And one last thing about this, Shannon, and that is, it truly seems today that America is more divided than we've been in decades. And we got to find a way in this country where we can once again reunite Americans as Americans and come together as one big family. And in that regard, find ways to reduce violence in our country.
Yeah.
We're so divided in this country, and we really got to find a way to bridge the gap. Meanwhile, this guy's political side of the fence is calling every Democrat and every person who is either LGBTQ or supports LGBTQ people not being oppressed, rumors and PDF files. But we got to find a way to be civil and come together, you know? We got to figure this out. Additionally, Governor Greg Abbott attributes mass shooting to mental health issues a month after cutting $211 million from the Mental Health Commission in Texas. What? No way. Are you meaning to tell me that right-wingers don't actually care about the mental health of their constituents, of the citizens of this country? Are you meaning to tell me that they're actually just utilizing so-called concerns about mental health the same way they utilize thoughts and prayers after any mass incident happens, any kind of tragedy happens that could have been prevented, in that it does nothing and it allows them to do nothing but pretend that they kind of care? Are you, what, really? No, they wouldn't do that. Republicans? Of course not. Surely there's some logical reason as to why you would cut $211 million from the Mental Health Commission in Texas a month before the shooting. Surely. Has to be. Because he's saying he's in favor of the long-term solution of mass shootings and mental health. Even though, you know, Republicans unanimously voted against expanding mental health services in schools, for instance, to try to stop mass shootings from happening. They almost universally voted against that. All Democrats voted for it. They consistently talk about how utilizing taxpayer dollars in order to have a single-payer healthcare system, which would hopefully also allow for people to access mental health care by taxing the wealthiest people in this country while still allowing them to be relatively wealthy. You know, that's spooky socialism. You can't do it. And also, all healthcare should be privatized, even though we've seen how bad that can be. They don't care about mental health. They never have. If you watch my show, you understand that. If you're new here, there you go. They don't give a shit. They don't care. Apparently, Texas is 48th in mental health funding in the United States of America. Greg Abbott has been governor for 8 years. Plenty of time to do something. So let's see. Who's the worst at spending for mental health care, according to this graph? The worst is Idaho. Then you got Nevada, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, Georgia, South Carolina, New Mexico, North Carolina, Virginia, Washington. That's not good. Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Kansas. All of these in this 35 to 50, aside from Washington and maybe a little bit of Colorado. Pretty red states, pretty conservative states. Huh. It seems like right-wingers don't really care about mental health. Wonder why that is. We've got another clip from a CNN reporting on this that I'd like to look at really quick. Like, what can we do about these mass shootings happening? Well, let's find out how the Allen Mall shooter got his guns. That might help.
Now, Jake, some new information just in on the weapons that this suspect owned, including that AR-15 style rifle used in this attack. I just got off with a law enforcement source who tells me that of the multiple weapons that were recovered that were owned by that suspect, all of them were purchased legally. Most of them were via private sellers, which means that they didn't go through a federal background check. That is legal here in Texas, obviously. If you buy from a private individual, you don't have to go through that federal system, but that's something we continue to hear from gun safety advocates ridiculing the so-called private seller loophole. It appears in this case that most of the weapons used that the shooter owned were indeed from a private seller all of them owned legally, Jake.
Well, that's curious. So, this guy ends up doing a shooting. And all of the guns that were used to do them, or most of them, went through private sellers, meaning that there were not federal background checks done on him that may have caught a variety of red flags that I think most normal, rational, reasonable people would then come to the conclusion that person probably shouldn't have a gun because they might be a threat to themselves or other people. And this might be a brave take I'm putting out here. I'm not a big fan when people are a threat to themselves or other people. I think those people should get help, which is why I am in favor of expanding healthcare and moving our broken healthcare system to a single-payer healthcare system and expanding access to mental health care as well, both physical and mental health care, utilizing taxpayer dollars that are mostly taken from the wealthiest people in this country while still allowing them to be pretty wealthy. But Republicans don't seem to have a similar idea. So there are a couple things that we could do that could have prevented this from happening. Had the shooter gone through a federal background check, there are a variety of red flag laws that might have caught and would not have allowed for the sale of that gun. Like the fact that around 60% of mass shooters have a history of domestic violence. If there's a person with a history of domestic violence trying to buy a firearm, might be a good idea to not let them have it for the safety of themselves and other people. Maybe. Or perhaps if they're posting on social media about a variety of violent thoughts and ideas that they have, or support for violent ideologies like Nazism, which is a inherently violent ideology that led to one of the greatest atrocities in human history, the Holocaust. You might not want that person to have firearms. Also, wait times for gun purchases may not have applied in this specific instance, but there have been mass shootings where the person bought the firearm incredibly close in time frame to them doing the mass shooting. The idea behind wait time for gun purchases is that you can't really have spur of the moment, heat of passion gun crimes happen if when you buy the firearm, you have to wait a period of days to a week or more to actually obtain it. So the sale goes through, you've passed the background checks and all this, and now you just have to wait a little bit longer to get your shiny new toy. So you can go down to the range and practice your aim, or whatever. It would allow that person to have several days to a week to kind of think about why they're buying this gun. Also, safe storage laws. So say there's a person who passes all the background checks, sits through the wait time, what an infraction on your rights. You have to wait a little bit to get your shiny new toy. And they have their gun. It's totally legal, totally above board. They're not a threat to themselves or other people. But there's somebody in their home who does have violent intentions on themselves or others. And they're aware that there's a gun in the home, because it's likely that they would be. If the gun is not stored safely, that gun is now accessible to anybody in the home, not just the person who passed the check. Meaning that if there is a person who knows where the gun is, and it's not secured safely behind lock and key, they could access it. So they don't even have to go through all the background checks, all the hoops and hurdles to obtain the firearm. They could just take it from somebody else. So instituting safe storage laws that mandate that owners of firearms have the proper storage behind lock and key that prevents these kinds of things from happening, from those guns being taken from them, might prevent from those kinds of things happening. There's also tragedies that have been reported on in the past where a parent will leave their firearms unsecured and out and loaded, which is absurd, and their children have actually found the firearm, not understanding what it is, and have either killed themselves by accident, their siblings by accident, or other family members. And it's fucking depressing and completely avoidable. If you train people on firearms, how to safely utilize them and how to safely store them, and then mandate that those be followed. But, funnily enough, right-wingers don't agree. Republicans consistently vote against any method that I've just listed that might make the prevalence of these mass incidents less likely. In fact, they pass legislation that makes it easier to access guns, like what we see in Texas here, where private sales are legal, and you don't have to go through background checks federally. Or allow for permitless carry, so you could just open carry a firearm or even concealed carry a firearm without a permit, meaning that you don't have to go through the training involved in getting a concealed or open carry permit, meaning that you are potentially less responsible with that firearm, and now you're in public having it out or concealed. consistently they vote against any kind of common sense gun regulation that the majority of people in this country support. And they often pass laws like Governor Greg Abbott in Texas that make incidents like this more likely to happen. So clearly right-wingers don't care that mass shootings are happening, because what proof do we have that they do? All we have are thoughts and prayers, which don't do anything. All we have are, oh, well, it's mental health issues. And then you cut funding to mental health services in your state and vote against mental health services being expanded in the House and the Senate in legislation that's being pushed there. Oh, well, it's the violent video games, it's the rap music, all of these things have been disproven. They will always move the goalposts, or provide nonsense solutions that don't actually solve the problem, because they don't really seem to care that these things are happening. Now, there's a variety of reasons why I theorize that might be. I've talked about this on stream before. One, the NRA is a very powerful lobby. Gun manufacturers, very powerful industry. And in the current system that we live in, politicians can get political donations from a variety of groups. And firearm manufacturers and the NRA can actually donate to politicians. That might have some kind of influence. You know, the money that you get that you require in order to run your election that allows you to potentially win your election. Now you're in a seat of power. You're going to be thankful for that money. And you might be willing to, I don't know, vote for or against certain things that might benefit that person that helped you win. This is not a radical concept. This happens in a variety of industry. In this specific instance, gun manufacturers. Could be that. It could be that that money is influencing their inaction. It could also be that they just don't really care about the deaths of people they consider to be undesirables that much, right? Like after the Club Q shooting, you had a lot of far-right people, and even some elected representatives who were spreading conspiracy theories about the Club Q shooter, that, oh, he was actually non-binary, even though that was seemingly just a ploy to get out of hate crime charges. And then once he was still getting charged with hate crime charges, they dropped it, and his lawyers used him for the Club Q shooting after that. Also had a history of being homophobic, queerphobic broadly. The idea that he was actually non-binary, completely ludicrous, but they continued to push it and call that person a trans shooter, right? And they also just like seemingly don't care that a bunch of queer people at a queer bar were killed. And clearly through their action don't care to do anything to stop it from happening, because that person also probably could have been caught by background checks, by red flag laws. So they don't seem to care too much about the fact that these things are happening. Also, coincidentally, if you know that there are more guns in this country than there are people, and you know that there's a variety of people on the streets that could have them at any given time, especially in states where the gun regulations are incredibly lax, like in Texas, well, that certainly gives you a justification for police to look more like the army, the military, have a bunch of hand-me-down military equipment, and essentially look like super soldiers when they're out and about, ostensibly being the protectors of the citizenry. It kind of allows for the justification of the inflated budgets that the police have. And that's just the prevalence of the guns themselves. Then you get into the fact that these guns are used in violent crime very frequently, mass shootings such as these, and that's even more justification. Well, what are we going to do about these mass shootings? Well, obviously, we got to get more funding to the police, because they're the people that are supposed to protect us. Even though in Nashville, the police response was actually some of the best that we've seen, especially compared to Uvalde, where it was abysmal. And they got there, I believe, within 12, 13 minutes. And by that time, the shooter was already able to claim the lives of countless people. So even the best possible police response is not good enough. So simply funding them more doesn't seem to be likely to fix the issue. But it does allow you to be like, hey, well, the police need more money, you know, even though they have inflated budgets all over the country. If you're a big fan of the police and the fact that they seem to enforce laws at a disproportionate fashion, stats have shown against black and brown people, what it is, what it is. What do you want me to do about it? All right? It's a time-honored classic. Also, if you're so inclined as to want, say, a national divorce, like, you know, certain absolute ghouls who look like Attack on Titan characters have said in the past, aka a civil war or a separation that would inevitably lead to a civil war, because who the fuck are you fooling? If you are looking for Civil War II Electric Boogaloo, having the broader social fabric of your country destabilized by the threat of mass shootings, if you're ever in any populated area, it puts people on edge. It makes people distrustful of others. It polarizes people in the political sense, and it inflames tensions that could lead to clashes like these, where violent neo-Nazis will go out to a mall and kill a bunch of people, potentially in the name of their ideology. So the continued prevalence of mass shootings seems to benefit certain people, and that could all be contributing factors to potential inaction on the issue, or even laws that make these tragedies more likely to occur. Now, there's unfortunately no real way to draw a concrete conclusion from that. This is just, theories that I have, but I think they're fairly sound given the explanations that I've given. And the only way you would ever know for sure is if they say it themselves. So we've got more from the serfs. The right, quote, "It's not the guns, it's mental health. We need more mental health resources to prevent mass shootings." Also the right. 205 Republicans vote against a bill to expand school mental health services. That's what I was talking about before. Republicans have spent months scapegoating mental health issues as a catch-all for problems like mass shootings. The 20 House Republicans who voted against the package to address substance abuse, mental health parity bill faces Republican opposition. They don't care about it. They don't care about mental health. It's just a way to to deflect, to pretend that they actually care about the fact that these tragedies are occurring, and it allows them to not really do anything about it. That's all that it is. It is thoughts and prayers by another name. And if you want to look into the right's broader views on mental health, well, you can look no further than the killing of Jordan Neely in New York City, who was having a mental health episode and had a history of mental health issues, who was then killed. And that was used, his mental illness was used as justification from a lot of right-wingers online as to, why his killer was justified. Because he's mentally ill. Also, you've got aforementioned Nazi account and wokeness being once again boosted by Elon Musk, saying U.S. population in 1955, 161 million. U.S. population in 2023, 332 million. The aforementioned year, mental asylum patients, 559,000. 2023, 35,000. This is the real crisis. Elon Musk says too many asylum patients then, too few now. Not to mention the absolute heinous treatment that people who were said to have been mentally ill were given in these institutions. They have never been friendly places to people with legitimate mental health issues, and also there are a variety of people that were thrown into these institutions that were claimed to have had mental health issues that actually didn't. Now, if you understand that history of the mental health asylums, who ended up going on to be lobotomized, to be electroshock therapied, which is just torture, a variety of things like this, and then you look at how a lot of these things were not by their own will, but they were forced into these institutions, and then you look at who the right wing consistently calls mentally ill with their entire chest. All it happens to be everybody they don't like. Happens to be, in the current moment, the biggest target of this smear is LGBTQ people, specifically trans people, because they see, gender dysphoria as a mental illness. Well then, if you have gender dysphoria, if you happen to be a trans person, you just be shipped off to a mental institution. And who cares what happens to you once you're in there, because ableism is rampant in this society. So now we have this person here. If you accept the fact that you can't disarm law-abiding gun owners, and that wouldn't do anything to stop homicidal maniacs anyway, what would be your solution to stop mass shootings? So the red flag laws, wait time for gun purchases, safe storage laws. There's a variety of things you could do to stop people who are not responsible enough to own a firearm from owning a firearm. The idea that this is a fact that you can't do anything about it is ludicrous, defeatist, and kind of helping mass shooters out, even if that's not your intention. You got Megyn Kelly, who, she lost her job at Fox News or something, right? "We need a mental health facility that is secure, guards locked down, but still humane enough that a loving parent would send her kid there for one. Right now, parents who know they're raising the next school shooter have next to no recourse." And here you have Elon Musk saying, exactly. Like, next to no resource. Whose problem is that? We're all trying to find the guy who did this. Republicans consistently vote down expanding healthcare in schools and for the general population, mental health care. And they also oppose common sense gun regulations that the majority of Americans support. And they also pass laws that make it easier to obtain guns. Virtually no recourse, of course. Why is that? It might be your party, Megyn Kelly. Alejandro Caraballo wrote, "With this, it should terrify people that the latest right-wing talking point is that we need to start involuntarily committing mass numbers of people to psychiatric facilities. Reminder that the Nazis sent people with disabilities to concentration camps. This is wholesale violation of due process and civil rights to involuntarily commit people to psychiatric facilities. Notice they don't mention criteria. There's a reason. Anyone they see as inferior would be fair game. LGBTQ people, unhoused people, etc. It's about power. This is eugenics making a comeback, and it's extremely disturbing how many in elite circles are really embracing eugenicist policies. It's like we literally learn nothing from history. It never starts with the camps, but it ends with them. All of these problems with society are a byproduct of unchecked capitalism. Absolutely. The insanely easy access to guns pushed by the gun manufacturers to the lack of affordable housing and accessible mental health care. Instead of fixing the problem, they want to sweep it under the rug. They'd rather involuntarily confine and incarcerate people wholesale than actually ensure that every person can live a life of dignity with access to adequate healthcare and affordable housing. Unchecked capitalism consistently results in fascism to keep it from collapsing, which is the current moment in time we're in. All of the policies that I've suggested today, from the policies specifically aimed at common sense gun regulation, as well as the policies aimed at improving the quality of life of the general populace so that they don't even think to do something so heinous as what happened in Allen, Texas, are opposed by Republicans and are a byproduct of unchecked capitalism. You'll notice that some of the biggest people in opposition to moving this country to a single-payer healthcare system away from a private health insurance model are capitalists. Are people who are proud to call themselves capitalists. And it would also hurt the private health insurance industries as well, which is why not a lot, is done about that, because private health insurance companies donate a lot of money to politicians. It's not looking good. And it is not just a lack of will that nothing happens either, as I hope you've understood at this point of watching this video. There is political movement in this country. Republicans are very excited to push certain legislation. They are having legislation being written and pushed and codified into law. Now, it's not about any measures to prevent mass shootings. It's not about any measures to enfranchise more people into the mental health system to get the mental health help that they need, not to mention physical health and the broader healthcare system, but it's to demonize and criminalize being transgender, or broadly being LGBTQIA+. From Alex Colliard, I just thought this was a good tweet to illustrate this point. Got an average of 600 mass shootings a year happen over a 3-year span. Republicans, there's no way to fix this. Trans people simply exist. 64 anti-trans bills passed, 376 currently active. It is not a lack of political will. It is not a aversion to drafting, writing, and pushing legislation and eventually working to get it codified into law. They have the ability to do something. They just do not want to. It's as simple as that. Now, in terms of what the individual citizen of the United States of America can do, I've talked about this at some point here. Republicans have told us loud and clear for decades that they are unwilling to do anything to address this epidemic of gun violence while they pass laws that make them more likely. The only solution is rendering this caustic party, the Republican Party, completely and totally politically irrelevant. And that truly is all that there is left. They are very clearly obstructionists to fixing any of the ills of society. They enjoy the fact that these ills of society exist, mostly because they get money from people who profit off of people suffering. So there are two unfortunate truths here. One, as we all know, being leftists, being on the left broadly, the Democrats are an ineffective opposition party. You got motherfuckers in Florida doing the cha-cha slide after that state has been doing all manner of anti-democratic shit, anti-LGBTQ shit, anti-immigrant shit. You got Florida Democrats doing the cha-cha slide with these motherfuckers like they're worth dignity at all. Number two, Republicans have actively worked and proudly do so to undermine our democracy, making Democrats even more ineffective than they already were. Which is hilarious because that's just a big L on its own. You're doing so much to try to make it so that Republicans always win by gerrymandering, suppressing voter turnout, like the Federalist Society, flooding courts at every level with conservative activist judges in order to be able to legislate from the bench. You've done so much anti-democratic shit, and you're still losing. You're still losing to Democrats. How? How is this happening? Well, it's because your ideas are not popular. In fact, they are toxic to the American people. They don't like them. But they're not given a powerful, strong alternative in the Democratic Party because they're an ineffective opposition party. And oftentimes they don't have a choice because of the gerrymandering, because of the voter suppression, because of the anti-democratic policies that Republicans have implemented, because of the fact that conservative activist judges can legislate from the bench, like the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and a variety of other shit that courts at every level have done in order to subvert legislation that is actually passed that might actually help anybody. They just understand they're not popular. They understand that they cannot win popular elections, which is why you have Donald Trump bogusly claiming that he won even though he lost. And trying to get audits done to a variety of elections that just prove Biden won by more, or a statistically insignificant amount of so-called voter fraud happened. This country requires immense electoral and direct action, or the GOP will continue to ruin it. And that's true. That's just the fact that we have in this country. You need to, if it is not prohibitively difficult for you to vote, vote for the least bad option. Now, I know I shit on the Democrats all the time. I promise I hate them more than you. But under the first past the post voting system, third parties are currently not mathematically viable. So the next best option, aka the least bad option, is the Democrats. And you should be voting especially down ballot in your local elections and for any ballot initiatives in favor of the Democrats. A do-nothing Democrat is at least going to buy us time, because they will vote against certain odious bills every now and again when they can, and keeping, Republican majorities out of the House and Senate are very important. Having at least Democrats in those seats is helpful for that. They're the least bad option, and you should be voting for them, and also trying to support primary opponents that are further to the left than the incumbents that might be there when it comes to Democrats. It is very important that at least the electoral level, we have people like Jamal Bowman, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, a bunch of people that are at the very least working to, if they can't get a variety of legislation passed because of more corporate Democrats or obstructionist Republicans, they can at least try to shift the Overton window, the realm of respectable thought and opinion, further to the left and away from the right. After how, Bernie Sanders runs in 2016, suddenly more and more people are in favor of Medicare for all, a single-payer healthcare system. More people are in favor of raising the minimum wage. More people are in favor of unions, right? It is important to do this, even if you don't get, concrete legislative wins. It's still helpful to have further left Democrats in seats. Also, direct action. Organizing on the ground. Supporting protests in whatever way you can, either by participating, or by donating to funds for them, bail funds for them, donating for any operations that might help deliver food to people in those instances, getting out information online even literally creating easily shareable memes can be very helpful. Say, you're not able to go out, walk around, et cetera, because of whatever disability or whatever kind of, you don't live anywhere near the area, but you still want to support. Being able to do information-related work online is very helpful. Kind of stuff like that. It's very important that there is a all-hands-on-deck, multi-pronged approach to this issue, because that's the only way you're going to win. You can't just rely on the electoral process and electoralism in the Democrats because of a variety of things I've already described, and you can't solely rely on direct action either. You have to do both. The direct action, mutual aid that you're doing, you have 364 days out of the year to do. And one day out of those years, you might cast a vote for the least bad option if it's not prohibitively difficult. And also, if you don't have the time to go out and vote the 1 or 2 days a year that you do, then you're certainly not going to have time to do the direct action or mutual aid either. So you can't really say that you want people to do that instead of voting if voting is impossible because of time, and how are you going to do the mutual aid? Anyway, all of it's important. It's all necessary, and it is all helpful. I hope you're all doing okay out there. Hope you got friends you can surround yourself with, family or found family out there. Shit's fucked, but I hope we can get through it. I have faith. I have hope. I am an incredibly, depressed person, and I still find a way to have hope for the future, so I hope you can as well. And yeah, take it easy, I suppose.